Hi and welcome. This is my video feedback to the work that you've done for week 5. Um, it's really interesting to see the progress as we dive more and more into the area of content literacies or literacy with our students. And it's a real interesting mix between those of you who are science teachers and those who are not. So the conversation is getting deeper, and I'm very happy about that. So let me start with some housekeeping. So first, what I've noticed is that for the groups that, well, let me start with this. Several of you this week indicated to me that you had forgotten about the work being due, and so turned it in either at the last minute or even after the last minute. I'm happy to send reminder emails as I've been doing, but I also ask that you be aware of deadlines. And so typically on Monday I post the work, the readings, your reading responses. If you're not the group leader for that week, are due on by the end of the day Thursday, so that the group leaders can do their 3x3s by the end of the day Sunday. If there's some, and there will be, I'm sure, issues with your schedule, then for sure be in touch with me, but also be in touch with your group leader so he or she can know that they have to make adjustments if they need to or whatever. But you're a group, so remember that you're not just on your own. So being in communication is always better than not being in communication. Secondly, what I've noticed is that it tends to be easier for the group leaders and myself to read responses that are posted as opposed to uploaded. So I'm not saying don't upload them, but it's much easier for all of us to deal with your responses if they're posted either in a discussion or as a blog post. It just makes it easier for all of us. Again, if that's working for you, by all means do it. But if it's a matter of your convenience, then I'm going to suggest that it's more convenient for the rest of us if you post it rather than upload it. And as I've said in emails and maybe in videos before, if you prepare your work in Word with the color coding, etc., the color coded annotation, and then paste it into either a discussion or a blog post, the color coding transfers, and so all that works. Okay. Thirdly, what I will say is that it seems to be so some of the groups are consistently posting their work as class discussions, some as blog posts. If what you're doing is working in your groups, then by all means don't change it. But if you think, so this is to the group leaders for this week, if you think it's worth a conversation with your group, then by all means reach out to people and let them know. Okay, so that's it about housekeeping. If you are having any trouble working with Pace Commons, meeting the deadlines, preparing a 3x3, by all means be in touch with me if I could be of any help about that. Okay, so that's it about housekeeping. Secondly, what I noticed in reading your response this week and in listening to, well, really watching the 3x3s, which, just as an aside, are getting better and better each week. So I think it's definitely a function of practice and getting more familiar with things, which might be kind of a lesson for all of us about literacy and routines. So what I've been noticing is, the first week in this structure of reading, responding, posting, and then preparing a 3x3, the first week was good, don't get me wrong, but as the weeks have gone on, the last, so week 3, 4, 5, the first 3 weeks of this cycle, I've seen kind of improvement both in people's confidence in posting their work, in the quality of the discussions that they're having, in the issues that are being raised, in the way that they're being raised, as well as an increased sophistication in the 3x3s, which is very nice. But I think that it also is a lesson for us about our students, which is it's a reminder about the value of routine. So, in the pressure of what I remember of being in a classroom, it's always now. You're always dealing with what's right in front of you and now. And there's a tremendous pull there because you have to do something now. There's 30, 35, CC, I'm thinking of you, 40 kids in a classroom at times. And you're there alone with them typically or with one other adult. But the pressure is on you as the lead instructor to be moving things along. So there's a tremendous push for the now, but what I've seen in this course, and I've seen in my experiences of teaching, is there is, and I'm sure you know this because you're all in your second year, that there is a benefit to establishing routines and then kind of just seeing to them and tending them, insert whatever gardening metaphor you like here, but really tending to it. And I think 3 weeks on, we're starting to see some real fruit harvested from the routine of reading the responses, annotating them in a particular way, gathering them up, and having those represented in the 3x3s. So I just share that with you because many of you have been sharing strategies that you're using with your students. See which ones of those can be, if they're not already routinized, and talk to us as the weeks go on about how that's paying off or not in your classroom. Okay. One of the issues that's also come up is I think that people are talking much more about the nuance, the complexity, the dynamism of student literacy and negotiating that along with all the other things that you're negotiating in your classroom. And I think an awareness of that is really positive, even though I know for myself the experience of that can be overwhelming at times. So I think Giuseppe has a room of mostly English language learners, and it sounds like from what he said to me when we worked together in class last year and in his post this year, that it continues to be a challenge to work on literacies with students whose English is burgeoning at best. So, and that's just an example. Many others of you also posted examples. Rachel, in your 3x3, you talked about this too, about, you didn't use these terms, but kind of the complexity of what we're dealing with. So I encourage you to keep leaning into that, to use the readings and the discussions to empower you in your deepening that work with the students, and keep bringing those concerns, challenges into the course. Interestingly, I happened to read an article this morning from a journal called Science and Education, and it was really about literacy. It's an editorial actually called On the Meaning of Concepts in Science Education. I posted this. It's a 2-page online article. It's an editorial from this journal, from the most recent issue of the journal. And while not all of you are science teachers, I thought you might find this useful. So you'll see it if you go to Pace Commons and you go to our group. There's a section for group bookmarks, and you'll see it's called, as I said, On the Meaning of Concepts in Science Education. And I wanted to read you a couple of passages. So here's the quote. As a result, any kind of discourse about science has to involve concepts, the meaning of which ought to be clear among those participating in the discourse, and as my own aside, including our students. However, the quote continues, this should not be taken as self-evident neither in science education nor in science itself. There are at least 3 issues to keep in mind. 1, that the meaning of particular terms in the vernacular language and our common language is different from respective science concepts. 2, that many of the science concepts are or relate to metaphors, and if you and I were in a classroom, I'd underline that word metaphor several times. And that 3, the same scientific concept can have different meanings and different scientific concepts. And that I'm ending the quote there, but by all means, take a look at the article. It's really, really interesting, editorial, really. So I think that this highlights things that are important. 1, that there are lots of words that are used commonly that mean something different in a science context, and with students that are being are challenged, readers are challenged in their area of literacy, that's going to be a real thing. Secondly, so much of these science concepts are communicated as metaphors. Again, we haven't read about them directly, but very sophisticated involves a very sophisticated set of literacy skills. And the last part, and I remember this as a student pretty vividly, that things mean different things in different places. So, because I used to teach middle school, it was fun to talk about cleavage. And cleavage means one thing when we're talking about embryonic development. It means another thing if we're talking about geology, and and it means another thing if you're a 14-year-old boy. So, um, you know, I share this and invite you to read that article and identify some of those challenges. I think they've put words to things that we've been wrestling in the course. Okay, so that's the end of my response to this week's work. I look forward to what comes down the pike for week 6. And as always, if you need anything, shout. Take care and stay dry.